Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Dr. Pete Economou. He is a prominent psychologist, author, assistant professor for the Department of Applied Psychology, and the director of Behavioral Health and Wellness for Rutgers University Athletics, and the co-host of the insightful podcast When East Meets West. Welcome to the show, Dr. Pete.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here, and let's dive right in.
Let's dive right in. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are discussing right now. We'll be talking about the transformative power of mindfulness. But before we come to that, let's understand a bit more about you, Dr. Pete, more about your journey so that people exactly knows who they are listening to.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And it's kind of cool that here we are again connecting the East and the West. And so as a person who lives in the West, that's our podcast. It's, I'm a trained psychologist, board certified in cognitive and behavioral therapy. And so that's the Western behavioral lens that, sometimes here we're trying to pathologize or diagnose certain behaviors. And one of the things we like to say is that what the East calls normal suffering is what the West is diagnosing, and so trying to kind of bridge this idea of mindfulness. And so my journey there began during graduate school, where I met my Zen teacher and, have been studying now with him for over 15 years. And it's nice to be able to blend all these things together.
Right, absolutely. So I want to understand, what is it that you are trying to do in terms of mindfulness? What is it, and who is your target here? What are the methods that you employ? I want to understand a bit from the ground level, so that people know, okay, this is what is happening on the other side of the world.
Yeah, well, mindfulness is from it's global, but I'm going to say it's really from the East. It's on purpose, it's in the present moment, and it's non-judgmental. That's the definition that we use from Jon Kabat-Zinn. He's a scholar who has written on mindfulness, and so what that means is whatever you're doing, you're just doing that. You're doing that with intention, and really one of the hardest part of the human condition is that you're doing that without judgment. So you're not judging how well you're doing, how bad you're doing. How it's making you feel. You're just committing to act. And that's not always something that's easy. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. I like to say that mindfulness is this sort of big umbrella. When I first started doing this about 15 years ago, people didn't know what it was, at least here in the US, not as much as they know today. And so what it is, and under this umbrella, is it could be meditation, but it could also be arts and crafts. It could be a really peaceful, mindful meal, eating, it could be exercise, it could be hiking. That's kind of the beauty of it, is that it could be a lot of different things as long as you're doing whatever you're doing in the moment, not judging it, and with that intention.
Right. So does it mean the mindfulness part is about one thing at a time? Should we understand it that way? Then
Yeah, I think that's a good way to understand it. Actually, we have research that came out of Harvard University where many people and many of your listeners might think that they are multitasking. This is a thing, especially in the West. If you don't have 15 windows open on your computer, you're not working. The brain can only focus on one thing at a time. So no matter how well conditioned your brain is, no matter how intellectually stimulated and smart you are, the brain can only do one thing at a time. And so mindfulness is a framework within which you can, do all of that in a more productive way. So we find that it does improve performance, improve kind of contact with life, improves life satisfaction, and many other benefits.
Right. So what happens to this term called multitasking? Because the industry wants that. Yeah. And forget you talked about several windows open at the same time. Nowadays, you have got multi-screens, those extension screens, 3 screens, and perhaps, a couple of other screens in front and back. That is the trend. Amidst all these things, do you think, Dr. Pete, mindfulness has a chance, or multitasking has a better can take the better of you?
That's a real. It's a tug of war, isn't it, AJ? It's a tug of war, and it's true. And so what I say is, I work with a lot of high performers. That could be CEOs, other sort of senior executives, as well as professional athletes. And these are people that are performing at the highest level. As you can have 10 screens, not only the windows open, you can have it. I, as you said that, I mean, pretty much every office I have has at least one or two external monitors. Because you can be more productive. So as long as I'm doing that mindfully. So if I have multiple screens up, I want to be in the moment and recognize the benefit of it. So for me, it's like if I have a couple research articles up and I'm writing on my main screen, that allows for me to like look at something, read something, kind of come back and forth. But you can only come back and forth. And really, that's one of the best practices that we do in mindfulness, is always returning back. So as your mind wanders, the goal is always to bring it back. And so if I'm having multiple screens or multiple windows open, bring it back. One thing at a time, one window, one screen, one task.
Fine, great. So, Dr. Pitt, I want to understand then, is mindfulness a response to the multitasking that we have started doing so strongly over the years? Or is mindfulness a individual thing in itself that that has come or that should come into our life? How should we look at? What do you want others to look at it, as a response, as a reaction, or as something that can be inculcated in our lives independently of whether we are multitasking or not tasking at all?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's sort of chicken and egg. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? I will say I think we have enough evidence that the the mindfulness came first. Mindfulness is born, and borrowed from the East of thousands and thousands of years ago of Buddhism. Usually, it's where we see it. There's some sort of either Buddhism, Hinduism, some sort of Eastern kind of connection where it was about inner peace. Ultimately, any kind of framework, religion, spirituality, philosophy that is focused on enlightenment or inner peace will likely have some components of mindfulness. And so I will say that came first. And so what I think we're learning is, and this is where I think it's beautiful to blend the East and the West, is that, some MRI studies, functional MRI studies, have shown us how the brain can change with the practice of meditation or mindfulness. And so then we know that we're more effective, in emotion regulation, concentration, sort of task orientation. Those are concepts that we can become more effective or stronger at, with this practice.
Right, Dr. Pete. Now, how do we actually get mindfulness into our lives? Is there a precondition to it, or it can be attained at any point in time? Is it about meditation? Because a lot of people think it's meditation, so they go to these studios and do so many other things. I want to understand, how can a person easily get started with mindfulness? Does he have to prepare anything, or he can get started anywhere at any point in time and achieve? And what are the benefits? How should they look at what mindfulness is? What is the tangible thing that they can get out of it? Only when contentment is a very difficult thing to explain. Only when you are not you are discontented with anything, that you understand that you are anxious. But contentment in itself, I don't know how many people will understand. Help us understand from a common person's perspective about how to achieve this thing called mindfulness.
Well, I think you said easily get started. I would probably just eliminate the word easily and then just say get started, because nothing's easy if you're trying to change behavior. How does one get started? They just commit to it. And I think the commitment is also about the roller coaster and the ebb and flow of life, which means just because I commit to it today doesn't mean I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I'm going to have moments where I'm less mindful. What I do like to say is you don't need any fancy memberships. You don't have to go to a studio. It could be, walking barefoot outside on the grass. that is a grounding technique. I think anything that we know from our spiritual philosophical practice, we can likely find some mindfulness practice in it. I have some executives that have new, young children or infants. Those can be mindfulness practices, where you're on the floor playing, with that child. Being boundaried around your phone usage, that can be mindfulness, so that if you're on social media or scrolling or something, maybe I have boundaries where when I'm with my child, I put it up on a basket on the counter, at least for 30 minutes. So, everything you want to think about is kind of stages that they can do. Benefits wise, I mean, there are tremendous amounts of benefits. The problem is that many of the benefits are not tangible. So for example, if I go to the gym and I'm trying to lose some weight or build some muscle, I can see that, over time. If I commit a couple weeks, I'm going to maybe my clothes are going to fit a little better. My muscles might get a little bit stronger, things of that nature. When it comes to looking at the brain, improvement, it's not so tangible. No one's just jumping in an fMRI machine to see how their brain is. I'm doing some research around that. So trying to kind of, have some empirical evidence about the impact. And we have some emerging research now around that, where we're finding, areas of the brain will change or become more dense, after this practice. And so the last thing I'll say is it's also, there's no one size fits all. And so when I'm working with somebody, I work with where they're at. And so if they're an artist, we create artist-like practices that are mindful. If they're an athlete, if they're a stay-at-home, if whatever they're doing, I think you can always find some way that you can do it, because you do not need a fancy membership to do this.
Right, Dr. Pete. Now, what is the relationship between mindfulness and mental health?
Yeah.
Some people may think, mental health is something now, it's on the side of the therapist. Now it should be taken care of that.
Yeah.
How would you like to address? Is there a scope for, mental health to be taken care of through mindfulness in the right manner? Is it like almost like a prescription, but without a prescription?
Yeah, I mean, it's a behavior. So mindfulness is a behavior, and a behavior that has shown to improve mental health. So I think they are directly related. Honestly, Ajay, I think it's hard to find anything that is not mental health related. That's sort of the work, because that's my view. But in 2024, many things that we are talking about, writing about, whether it's on the news or in any kind of arena, will have something related to mental health. When I was doing this, 15, 20 years ago, it was kind of taboo and stigmatized. There's, far less stigma attached with, say, working with somebody like me. So I say, and I train graduate students in this. And so one thing that's important is that if somebody is using mindfulness as an intervention for mental health to improve it, they need to have their own practice. So it's not that somebody can just say, hey, go do X, Y, and Z and meditate. And, they need to have their own practice. And so I think that for me, I feel really lucky and blessed and validated that I was able to meet my teacher, Robert Kennedy Roshi, who is, as I said, he's, a Zen, teacher, and to be able to kind of have all of that knowledge underneath in a non-secular way. Technically Buddhism is not even a religion, it's a philosophy. So it's not like I'm preaching and trying to change people, their spiritual beliefs. Everyone can, if I'm, no matter what if I'm Muslim, if I'm, Hindu, if I'm Catholic, there's always mindfulness practices within each of these religions. If it's prayer, if it's rosary beads, if it's, the 7 prayer, during the day, there's always moments that people can find and create those mindfulness things, which ultimately all that together will improve one's mental health.
Right. Then as a psychologist,
Mm-hmm.
when you talk of mindfulness, and also that there is a point till when it can help. There might be some people who may just be more relying on mindfulness, whereas it will be time for them to visit a psychologist or take some
Yes.
medical help. How does one know, okay, this is where mindfulness I have tried. This is going to help. This has helped me as far as this possible. And more I should go to, that there is no hiding of anything by whatever, things that you are trying to do. How does one differentiate that part so that he or she can get real help at the right time?
AJ, that's such a good question. It really is, because it's there's no elimination of suffering. I think that's important to recognize. That's the first noble truth is that you're trying to eliminate suffering. But ultimately, when you get to enlightenment, you realize that the, discontentment you mentioned is really, more of the normal. And so it's accepting that, it's learning to accept that, so that people can, get to a place where they can feel better. So this is not something that's like super easy. It is something that, people have to, I think, as they meditate or if they practice mindfulness, hopefully they become more aware. And as they're more aware of their internal experience, as they're more aware of, their self, that they'll be able, to recognize when it has crossed over. And I think, that's one of the beautiful things about, what we call like the cushion. In Zen and any kind of formal meditation, there's the cushion that people come back to. When you're just sitting on the cushion and meditating, it can be very lonely. And that's sort of the practice, because you're trying to get to a place of this internal understanding. And so one of the things I like to say is you can never lie to yourself. So if you're realizing that this isn't working, or that there's something more medical kind of significant going on, it means that you may have to take that step to a psychologist or to a physician or to some other healthcare provider. And again, the beautiful thing is there's lots, of resources and hopefully more accessibility, depending on where people are in the world.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for holding fort, Dr. Pete. There was a technical thing. I went off, but fortunately, this software does not end the stream. We are very much just. So thank you for that. Now I'm back. Thank you for explaining that thing very well, so that people, as I said, can seek help when it is actually required and take help for mindfulness, through mindfulness as much as they can, but know when to go beyond that. Now, let's understand this more through your book, Mindfulness Workbook for Beginners. What is this book all about, and who is this for beginners? I get it, but who are these beginners? Even a CEO is a beginner, or just a beginner is a beginner?
Absolutely. This is one of the best things that we do, and one of the best gifts for mindfulness, for me, is a thing called beginner's mind. Beginner's mind means you want to experience everything as if it's the first time. If you go into a conversation, or if you go into a meeting and you feel like you're the expert and you want to just get your point across, you're missing something. You're not listening. You're not experiencing the other person. So the Mindfulness Workbook for Beginners is actually one of the only and one of the first books that's more general around the practice of mindfulness. Many of the other publications kind of focus on a specific issue, might be mindfulness for eating disorders or mindfulness for anxiety. And so this one is like a very introductory approach to how to do mindfulness, and maybe how to integrate it in one's life. But again, it's not meant to be read cover to cover. It's sort of like just little bits and pieces here and there, and just sort of see what parts of it really resonates and the reader connects with.
Right, right. You have done a bit of research, if I understand. Share us a bit, some important. I don't know exactly the details of the what some of the findings of your research has been, so that people are able to, gain that insight and apply in their life if that is working for them.
Yeah, so the research is broad, but ultimately, one of our studies right now is just looking at how meditation mindfulness can kind of help somebody that's experienced a concussion. Looking at the brain and how the brain can respond to concussion. We also have looked at ways of building systems to keep destigmatizing mental health or mindfulness-based practices. Trying to understand ways that we can reach groups that are not otherwise reached. We just submitted a study to provide wellness interventions for youth of color from marginalized and lower impoverished communities. Wellness and to be well can be expensive. Again, to meditate costs nothing, but to make sure that you have good sleep hygiene means that you have to have a comfortable temperature and a comfortable mattress, and you have to have blinds on your windows. You have to have healthy food that's not processed. You have to have time. And these are things that not everybody has. And so I'm really trying to get this, focus on well-being into the hands of those that would not otherwise have it. So that's, some of the gist of it. We also do a lot of multicultural, anti-racist work, especially in the world of athletics. And then kind of bridge some of this with performance, so as a sports psychologist, we use mindfulness to kind of help train the brain to perform at the optimal level. So we have some studies around that about, how feasible and acceptable mindfulness is, for this like high performing athletes.
Right. One more question I want to understand from you, Dr. Pete, as a psychologist. Nowadays, there is hundreds of apps which have come out based on artificial intelligence, trying to help people in terms of mental health and associated things.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder, how is it actually happening? If I understand, AI does not have feelings. AI has yet to reach that level of sentience.
Yeah.
So how is it that it is helpful when it cannot understand, has no feelings, and also perhaps cannot understand the feelings in the true sense? Feelings, can anyone fully describe their feelings, or is it just one word or the other? I want to understand this aspect of seeking help on mental health through artificial intelligence. What is your take on this?
Wow, that's my take is I think you're going to help us get enlightened. As you kind of think about sentient beings and sort of how AI will interact with that. I don't know that we know yet. I think one gift that mindfulness has given me is psychological and cognitive flexibility. So in one of my professional roles at one point, telehealth. So the idea of even being able to use a screen to talk to a provider, there were some of my colleagues that were very against it. Like, oh, this is not good. You can't do that. And I just sat there and said, it's what it is. It's changing. And I recognize that any of the difficulty people were having around it were because it was different and the change was uncomfortable. That's my sense with AI and emotion, is that anything that we're struggling with around it is related to the discomfort of the change of this new entity, this thing that is coming, and it's going to change the world. It's going to change how we communicate. It's going to change how we work. I've submitted some journal articles that then ask me if I've used AI for writing. And I'm allowed to, I guess, for some journal articles, in journals. I haven't done that yet, but I've poked around because, of course, I train and teach graduate students, and so I just want to be abreast to some of these kind of technologies, just so I know what's going on. But I'm encouraging my colleagues just to become more flexible around it. That it's not, we can't stop it. It's going to be here. So it's just learning how to be with it and do it on purpose in the present moment and without judgment. And so I think the gift of that non-judgment has been super helpful, just to learn and to experience other people and other things.
Right, Dr. Pete. Now let's learn about your podcast a bit, When East Meets West. Not very long ago, there was someone who said, "Oh, East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet." And now somebody again from the West is saying, "When East Meets West." It's nice to see that. Help us understand, what is this podcast all about, When East Meets West?
Yeah, my colleague, Dr. Nikki Rubin, and I, it's actually a creative little double entendre around East meets West. So yes, we take Eastern spiritual practices. So my training in Zen Buddhism, and we're both psychologists. So that's the Western behavioral science. And we blend those two together, help kind of the listeners recognize how a lot of Eastern philosophy has really helped shape Western behavioral science, especially today. It's what we call the third wave of cognitive and behavioral therapy. But then the other piece of this is that I'm on the East Coast of the United States, in the New York area, and Dr. Rubin is on the West Coast, in LA, California. And so we really have even that level, because I don't know if the Eastern listeners will be familiar with this, but even in the US, there's a lot of different cultures, and so the way that we see the world, just like in New York versus California, is different. And so that's kind of fun to look at how that also shapes behavior as well.
Wonderful. And technology is now putting everything together. It's making things so much easier.
Yes, it when it works, it makes things easier. But we're not we're elder millennials, and so we are a little behind the curve with technology, and so sometimes we struggle with cameras and microphones and all that. Like happens, right? It happened with with us today. It's just what it is.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yes.
There is much to learn from you about mindfulness, about behavioral health, and so many other things, Dr. Pete. So, a lot of people who like to learn more about you, from you, get your coaching if possible. So, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, official Dr. Pete. So Instagram, official Dr. Pete is the tag, and send me a message there or follow. And we put out some regular kind of, often almost daily kind of advice and sort of other resources for people to do this. I am really focused on trying to get this word out to a larger audience, because suffering's natural. We'll work to reduce it, but we'll never eliminate it. And so being able to accept that means we'll have more peace. This will sound a little cheesy, but I think some peace in the world, more than ever, no more than ever do we need that. And I think that, some of the stuff that I work on has a lot of potential to provide that.
Absolutely. To me, it sounds all very normal. Desire of a normal person for normal things in life. And that's
Yes.
what I guess a lot of normal people want in their lives. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.